Princess Saelari was very small, even by the standards of her own people. On the day her world fell, she stood barely to the chest of her tallest guards, her soft silver-blue skin marked with the faint bioluminescent patterns of the Aurelian royal line. Those patterns dimmed as the sky above her palace burned. Massive warships blotted out the sun, their shadows crawling over white spires and crystal gardens that had stood for thousands of cycles. The Aurelians were not a warrior species. They were diplomats, scientists, and caretakers of ancient knowledge. For generations, they believed intelligence naturally led to peace. That belief died the moment the Varkesh Dominion arrived. Saelari remembered the sound most of all, the deep, vibrating roar of orbital cannons tearing through atmosphere shields. She remembered her mother kneeling before her, pressing a small data core into her hands. "You must live," Queen Estra whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Not because you are royalty, but because you are kind." Moments later, Saelari was sealed inside an escape pod and launched into the dark. The pod drifted for weeks. Its systems were old but reliable, designed to seek habitable worlds and broadcast a faint distress signal in frequencies few predators monitored. Saelari slept in cycles, waking only to drink nutrient gel and stare at the stars through the tiny viewport. She wondered if anyone else had survived. She wondered if being a princess mattered when there was no kingdom left. Eventually, the pod shuddered violently. Gravity pulled at her as atmosphere screamed around the hull. Fire streaked past the window, and Saelari curled into herself, her small hands clutching the data core. With a final impact that knocked the breath from her lungs, the pod crashed. Silence followed. When she woke, the air smelled different, rich, alive. The pod had split open in a forest of towering green structures she later learned were called trees. Sunlight filtered down in warm shafts. Her distress beacon pulsed weakly. Saelari stepped out onto unfamiliar soil, alone on an alien world called Earth. Ethan Cole had not planned on finding an alien princess that morning. He was a salvage engineer by trade, contracted to recover old satellite debris and crashed objects for private research firms. When his sensors picked up an anomalous energy signature deep in the forest, he assumed it was a military test drone or a meteor fragment worth a bonus. What he found instead was a small, trembling figure standing beside a smoking pod. Ethan froze. The figure was clearly not human. Large, reflective eyes regarded him with terror. Faint glowing patterns rippled across her skin, flickering like dying stars. She raised her hand slowly, mimicking the surrender gestures she'd learned from intercepted broadcasts. "I do not wish harm," she said in broken Galactic standard, her translator struggling with human phonetics. Ethan swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at him to run, report, call someone important. Instead, he lowered his own hands and spoke softly. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." Saelari didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. For the first time since her world fell, the light on her skin brightened. In the weeks that followed, Ethan hid Saelari in a remote cabin he owned far from cities and satellites. He told no one. Not the government. Not the corporations that would pay fortunes for a living alien specimen. He learned her name. He learned her story. Saelari learned about humans, about their contradictions. How they fought wars yet wrote music. How they could be cruel but also fiercely compassionate. Ethan showed her old movies, books, and stories about humanity's long climb from fragile beginnings. "What makes someone valuable?" Saelari asked one night, watching a human film about heroes. Ethan thought for a long moment. What they choose to do when they have the chance to do good. Saelari looked down at her small hands. "Then I must become valuable." To Ethan, she already was. The galaxy did not forget Aurelia. The Varkash Dominion eventually traced the escape pod's trajectory. When their ships entered Earth's system, humanity panicked. Governments scrambled defenses that barely matched Varkash scouting fleets. Communications were intercepted, threats delivered. Surrender the Aurelian royal survivor, or Earth would burn. Ethan watched the news in silence as Saelari stood beside him, her glow dim with guilt. "This war follows me," she said softly. "I will go. They will spare your world." Ethan turned to her sharply. "No. They won't." She blinked. "But they promised." Ethan almost laughed, a bitter sound. "So, did a lot of people in our history." Saelari's voice trembled. "Then millions will die because of me." Ethan knelt in front of her, meeting her gaze. "Listen to me. You're not a bargaining chip. You're a person. And you don't decide your worth based on what monsters demand." For the first time, Saelari saw something fierce behind his kindness. Human defiance. Humanity made a choice. Instead of surrendering Saelari, they did something unprecedented. Scientists worked with the Aurelian data core she carried, unlocking ancient defensive technologies meant only to preserve, never conquer. Human engineers adapted them with startling creativity. Where Aurelians sought harmony, humans found resilience. The Varkash expected fear. They found preparation. When the Dominion fleet entered Earth orbit, they encountered shields that bent space, weapons that disabled without annihilating, and fleets coordinated with terrifying efficiency. Humanity did not outgun the Varkash, but they outthought them. Saelari watched the battle from a secure facility, her hands clasped as she whispered hopes rather than prayers. Ethan stood beside her the entire time. The battle lasted hours. When it ended, the Varkash fleet retreated, crippled and humiliated. Earth still stood. In the aftermath, the galaxy took notice. Humans had defended a child of another species not for profit, not for power, but because it was right. Diplomatic channels flooded with messages. Worlds long oppressed by the Varkash whispered a new word with cautious hope. Humanity. Saelari was brought before Earth's leaders. Cameras recorded as she stood on a raised platform, small and radiant, her patterns glowing brighter than ever. "I was born a princess," she said, her voice steady. "But my title did not save me. A human did." She turned to Ethan in the crowd. "He did not protect me because of my crown," she continued. "He protected me because he saw my worth when I could not." The silence that followed was profound. The ending years later, Saelari stood beneath a sky filled with stars, no longer trembling at their sight. Aurelia was being rebuilt, not as an empire, but as a sanctuary. Humans and Aurelians worked side by side, blending philosophies. Where Aurelians taught restraint, humans taught courage. Together, they became something stronger than either alone. Saelari was no longer called the small princess. She was an ambassador, a bridge between worlds. Ethan visited often, older now, streaks of gray in his hair. On one quiet evening, they stood on a balcony overlooking the reborn Crystal Gardens. "You know," Ethan said, smiling, "you never needed a crown." Saelari smiled back, her glow warm and steady. "And you never needed power to be great." The galaxy would remember many things about humanity, their battles, their inventions, their stubborn refusal to surrender. But Saelari would remember one truth above all others. In a universe full of rulers who demanded obedience, it was a human who chose compassion. And because of that choice, the stars themselves felt a little kinder.